Thank you very much, Chairman. I am not a professional politician, so I take a different view of this. But I welcome the opportunity to be here today to support particularly the services at Darlington Memorial Hospital. But I think we need to see this whole process in the context, the full context of what it is. Because this is, in fact, the biggest top-down reorganisation in the history of the health service at a time when we face the biggest deficit or funding gap, or whatever you want to call it, the £30 million gap, which is reduced to 22 billion, reduced to 22 by the government extra funding. North Yorkshire has been split into 3 different STPs, and we would rather we'd had one for the whole of the county, because we are a very rural county. And the part of North Yorkshire that has been taken into this STP is the Hambleton, Richmondshire and Whitby, which has unique problems because it is a large rural area. It contains 2 national parks, the North York Moors and the North York and the Yorkshire Dales National Park. It is very rural, and has a much older population profile than other comparable authorities. At the same time, as already been mentioned, it also hosts the biggest military base in Europe at Cllr, and Cllr is going to expand. So we have these major challenges that need to be addressed. Now, some time ago, we lost consultant-led maternity services and paediatric services at the Friarage Hospital in Northallerton. And we were told at that time we would have the choice of having James Cook, which was always there, and the Darlington Memorial. We needn't worry, people would have the opportunity to go to Darlington. That was only 2 years ago. And now we're faced with having to fight again to have these services maintained in Darlington. That was the last time we had major reorganisation in the health service, the Lansley reforms and the Nicholson Challenge. The Nicholson Challenge, the funding gap was only 20 billion at that time. We've come on 4 years, the funding gap's gone up and the challenges have gone up. I could go on at length about the large distances we have to travel in North Yorkshire, in Wensleydale, or from the North York moors. And the other factor is that the roads are not particularly good. And I know when we had the consultation in Hawes that some of the people who came up were surprised how difficult it was to navigate their way to Hawes. But imagine that in a wet, windy night when you're bringing a pregnant woman down for treatment and birth. And the other problem we have is that not only are we sort of in Yorkshire is in the region Yorkshire and the Humber. It's not even in the North East region. So we have a different ambulance service than the one that you have in the North East. We have the Yorkshire ambulance service, and we have major challenges on response times. And therefore there are major problems with meeting the golden hour, as they call it. So it's very rural, it takes a long time to get to places, and it requires the services that we have at the moment at Darlington, because we don't know what will be the effect on the Friarage itself if services are reduced at the Darlington Memorial. Another problem that concerns us, and I suppose it concerns you, has been the lack of engagement with local authority elected members. Very few people know what's going on. This has been a National Health Service driven operation, and I sympathise with our colleagues in the health service. They don't realise the impact. And when they talk about us in the North East, well, I'm afraid a large part of this STP is not in the North East. It is in Yorkshire and the Humber. And that's another problem we have. We also talk about services closer to home. Where is the investment to come from? There will need to be substantial investment in services, and there will need to be rural proofing of these services. We need protection. There are not many people in rural areas, but they do matter. They deserve the same level of health care as people do in urban areas. And one of the problems we have in the whole of North Yorkshire is that the STPs that we have been attached to are all predicated on urban areas, whether it's Middlesbrough or whether it's Hull or whether it's Leeds. And they have different challenges completely to those that we face in the rural areas. There is a very fragile market in social care in rural areas. And in light of the cuts that we have had in local government funding for social care, it is very challenging. And I wonder about getting the funding. There isn't enough capital in the NHS. And if you read the 5-year forward plan, it states that from the 1st of April, all transformational funding will be through STPs. And that means that we will be put one against another to get funding for the rural areas of North Yorkshire. We'll be competing against Darlington and Hartlepool and all these other places. And I'm not quite sure that this is being driven, and I'm sure the motives are right, that about improving patient care. But in fact, you cannot ignore the deficits. And this, we've seen that the funding gap, I don't mind what you call it, we need an extra £250 million to support health in this STP area. I don't know how much the reconfigurating the hospitals is going to contribute to that. I wouldn't have thought it will be very much. It certainly won't be anything like that sort of money that we need. We have workforce issues. It is ridiculous that it is easier in this area for the health service to recruit a management consultant than it is to recruit a paediatric consultant. And that cannot be right. It cannot be right. We're also concerned about if we downgrade either of hospitals, the impact that will have on James Cook. James Cook is already at capacity. And I think we really need to look at this very carefully, and we really need to engage the people. There are major challenges in the workforce, and I think we really need to be able to take evidence. It was mentioned earlier that we need a much greater evidence base. And I think it's very important, that, and I welcome Darlington having this meeting today so that we can make these points. But the people of North Yorkshire matter as much as the people of Darlington, as they do throughout this country. It is a national health service, and we must always remember that. I'll leave you with a bit of hope and optimism, I think, because one of the problems in the health service I've found from the years I've been involved with it is that you tend to put one hospital against another. It's either or. You can't have both. Now, I was probably fighting against most of the people in this room a few years ago because they told us for children's congenital heart problems, you either had to have Leeds or you had to have Newcastle. And we did an enormous amount in Yorkshire on scrutiny and gathering evidence. It took a judicial review. It took a letter to the Secretary of State. I gave evidence personally to the independent reconfiguration panel. And today we have services in Newcastle and in Leeds, because it would have been unthinkable to have people travelling these massive distances. And I believe if we can get the evidence base correct, if we can get the investment correct, it shouldn't be an either or, it should be improved services at both. But if it does become either or, then the people in the northern part of North Yorkshire will be with you behind the campaign to keep the existing services at Darlington Memorial Hospital. Thank you.